The long drive home from a grueling 3-day business trip in Portland left me drained, my mind already drifting to the quiet weekend ahead. But as I pulled into my driveway, a sharp, unfamiliar scent hit me, fresh sawdust laced with something sour, like decay. Then I saw it. The ancient maple tree, a towering sentinel that had shaded our family's storage shed for over a century, was gone. Its massive trunk lay sprawled across the shed, crushing it like a tin can under a boot. The shed's metal roof was twisted into jagged edges that glinted in the fading sunlight, and the wooden beam sturdy oak timbers built by my grandfather in 1954 were snapped like twigs. Through the wreckage, I glimpsed the ruins of our family's past. Shattered boxes of old photos, my grandmother's porcelain dishes, my dad's tools, all buried under tons of splintered wood and warped steel. My hands trembled as I stepped out of the car, keys slipping from my fingers and clattering onto the pavement. This wasn't just property damage. It was the annihilation of a legacy my family had nurtured since before this neighborhood even had a name. And someone had done this while I was 2,000 miles away, pitching software updates in a sterile conference room. Before I could process the devastation, I heard the sharp click of heels on asphalt. Margaret Langley, the HOA president, emerged from the shadows of her immaculate property line, her navy blazer crisp and her pearls gleaming with calculated elegance. Her gray hair was pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to stretch her face into a mask of cold satisfaction. "Oh, you're back, Nathan," she said, her voice dripping with the polished condescension of someone used to getting her way. "I was hoping we could discuss this before you got too upset." She waved a manicured hand toward the wreckage, as if it were a minor landscaping issue. The emergency removal was for community safety. That tree was unstable, and after last week's storm, we couldn't risk it falling on someone's house or worse, a child. I turned to face her, my voice rough with barely contained rage. "Emergency removal? Margaret, that tree was perfectly healthy. I had an arborist inspect it 6 months ago after that windstorm. He said it was one of the strongest maples he'd ever seen." The words felt futile against the evidence of her decision scattered across my yard like a crime scene. Margaret tilted her head, her expression a practiced blend of sympathy and superiority. "I understand you're upset, Nathan, but as HOA president, I have a duty to the community. We had multiple reports about the tree's condition, and our emergency protocol demands swift action when safety's at stake." She flashed her phone, showing blurry photos of alleged damage to the tree's base, photos that looked more like natural wear than structural failure. "The removal process had some complications with your shed," she added, as if the destruction of my family's history was a clerical error. "Complications?" I stared at the wreckage, noting how the tree had fallen with surgical precision, crushing the shed while sparing Margaret's prized azalea garden just 20 feet away. How had they known I'd be out of town? Why hadn't they called me? And why did Margaret's eyes glint with the satisfaction of someone who'd just checkmated an opponent? Among the debris, I spotted yellowed papers from my grandfather's office, including the corner of an old surveyor's map. The soil near the tree's uprooted base showed signs of hasty, mechanical excavation, not the work of careful arborists, but of someone in a rush. In that moment, staring at Margaret's composed face amid the ruins of my family's past, I realized this wasn't just an HOA mistake. It was the opening gambit in a game I hadn't known I was playing. I called the county dispatch office that evening, driven by a software engineer's instinct that data never lies, even when people do. The 911 call that had triggered the emergency tree removal was public record, and what I heard in that 5-minute recording made my blood run cold. The call was placed at 3:12 p.m. on Tuesday, 15 minutes after I'd texted my neighbor about my Portland trip, a text I'd never posted online. The voice was unmistakably Margaret's, though she tried to mask it with feigned panic. "This is a resident of Cedar Hollow, reporting a dangerous tree at 1423 Pine Lane," she said, her usual clipped tone breathless. "It's a massive maple showing severe structural failure. There are kids playing nearby. We need it removed immediately." She gave her name and HOA title without hesitation, lending her complaint enough weight to bypass standard procedure. But here's what burned me. I'd never shared my travel plans publicly. Margaret had known I'd be gone, which meant she'd been watching me, waiting for her moment to strike. I needed answers, and I knew where to find them. Old Tom Harrison, an 80-year-old neighbor who'd lived on Pine Lane longer than my family, was the neighborhood's unofficial historian. I found him pruning his roses, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Heard quite a ruckus at your place while you were gone, Nathan," he said, his eyes heavy with concern. "Sounded more like demolition than tree work." I sat on his stone wall and cut to the chase. "Tom, what do you know about Margaret's history with our land?" His expression darkened, and he glanced toward her house before lowering his voice. "That's a tale from about 12 years back, before Margaret became the HOA's iron fist. She was different than organized book drives, ran charity events, even hosted the Christmas party. But after her divorce, she changed." He explained how Margaret had approached my grandfather, hoping to buy part of our land for her son to play on during custody visits. My grandfather, bound by a promise to keep the land intact, refused but offered to let her son play there anytime. Margaret took the rejection personally, growing bitter when her custody battle failed and her son stayed with his father. "She started seeing your family's land, especially that tree, as a symbol of everything she couldn't have," Tom said. "And with property values soaring, that maple blocked her lake view, which is worth a fortune now." Tom's final revelation hit like a punch. Margaret had been tracking everyone's schedules, calling it neighborhood security. She noted absences, watched for packages, even quizzed the mail carrier about vacation holds. It wasn't safety, it was surveillance. The pieces clicked. Margaret hadn't acted out of concern. She'd seized an opportunity to erase the tree that lowered her property's value, knowing I'd be powerless to stop her. But she didn't know that by destroying my shed, she'd unlocked a secret she'd spent years trying to bury. At midnight, unable to sleep, I logged into the HOA's shared email system as a dues-paying member. What I found was a digital trail of corruption that would make a mob boss blush. An email chain between Margaret and Horizon Properties, titled Cedar Shores Phase 1, stretched back 9 months long before any safety concerns about my tree. The emails outlined a plan to turn our neighborhood into an exclusive lakefront community, with Margaret earning a 15% cut on every property sold. A spreadsheet listed every home on Pine Lane, including mine, with estimated buyout costs and resistance ratings. My family's legacy property was marked high risk, targeted for relentless HOA enforcement to wear us down. Margaret had introduced 52 new regulations in 8 months: grass height limits, paint color approvals, holiday decor restrictions, all designed to harass residents into selling. She'd even redirected HOA funds to transition services, using our own money to finance our displacement. The emails also revealed her endgame. Phase 1 involved removing aesthetic obstructions, like my tree. Phase 2 ramped up fines to force 50% of residents out by spring. Phase 3 used eminent domain to seize holdouts. But Margaret had grown sloppy. Her emails with Horizon included blatant strategies to target vulnerable residents, like the elderly or financially strained, with relentless violations. She'd assumed her legal framework was airtight, but she hadn't counted on a software engineer with a knack for data and a grudge. The next morning, fueled by coffee and fury, I sifted through the shed's wreckage, expecting to find only memories. Instead, I uncovered a legal bombshell. After hours of clearing debris, I reached my grandfather's fireproof safe, its door cracked open by the tree's impact. Inside was a legal archive, deeds, surveys, and correspondence dating back to 1925. The original surveyor's map showed our property extending 45 feet west and 70 feet south, encompassing half of Margaret's house and her entire garage. A 1954 letter documented a surveying error that had shaved off our land, which my great-grandfather let slide to avoid displacing neighbors. A handwritten note from my grandfather, dated 2 years before his death, revealed he'd discussed the issue with Margaret's ex-husband, David Langley. David had promised to resolve it fairly, but after their divorce, Margaret chose to bury the truth rather than face it. Her tree removal was no accident, it was an attempt to destroy the evidence of our claim. Instead, she'd exposed it, scattering documents across my yard for any lawyer to verify. Holding my grandfather's note, I felt the weight of his choice. He'd valued kindness over legal rights, letting David's family stay. Margaret had twisted that mercy into a chance to steal, but her greed had backfired spectacularly. By dawn, an email from a PR firm, mistakenly sent to the entire HOA board, revealed Margaret's next move: a campaign to paint me as a reckless neighbor obsessed with nostalgia over safety. A Cedar Hollow safety Facebook page popped up, with doctored photos of my property looking derelict. By noon, a petition to enforce my compliance had 250 signatures from strangers. But Margaret had crossed a Lanesh paid the PR firm $18,000 with HOA funds, a clear violation of state law. I fought back with a weapon she couldn't counter: transparency. By 2 p.m., my HOA Truth Project website was live, exposing every email, invoice, and document of her corruption. I reached out to Sarah Kim, a journalist whose Suburban Shadows blog had exposed HOA scams for years. When I shared my evidence, she was floored. "This isn't just your fight, Nathan, it's fraud on a scale I've never seen." That afternoon, Sarah arrived with a camera crew, filming the scattered documents and the wreckage. Her idea to live-stream the safe's contents was a masterstroke. As I read the 1925 survey aloud, viewership soared from 60 to 60,000. The chat erupted when I showed Margaret's house on our land, with lawyers offering pro bono help. The hashtag Hawthorne versus Tyrant trended, and local news picked up the story. Margaret doubled down, sending a crew to cut my remaining trees, claiming safety hazards. Sarah live-streamed it, with 25,000 viewers watching the trespass. A county prosecutor commented, "This is felony evidence." At 10 a.m., a courier delivered a lawsuit from Margaret's law firm, demanding $250,000 for harassment and property value damage. It was meant to scare me, but it backfired. Sued while her crew was caught on camera. That evening, Margaret called an emergency HOA meeting to expel me. She expected a quick victory, but the room was packed with strangers: HOA victims, reporters, and residents drawn by Sarah's stream. Margaret's speech faltered as my family's lawyer, John Carter, distributed the 1925 survey and proof of her fraud. Horizon Properties had canceled their deal, spooked by the land dispute. Sarah stood, camera rolling, and asked, "Shouldn't we be voting to remove you, Margaret, for stealing land and HOA funds?" Margaret's facade cracked. "I just wanted a place for my son to come back to," she whispered, her voice breaking. For a moment, I saw a grieving mother, not a predator. But her choices had consequences. She left the room, her heels echoing defeat. 3 weeks later, Judge Ellen Ramsey delivered an $18 million verdict for $100,000 for the shed, $1 million for 70 years of land theft, and $500,000 in punitive damages. Margaret's house was auctioned to pay it, restoring our boundaries. I turned her garden into Hawthorne Legacy Park, planting 7 maples for resilience, generosity, patience, integrity, community, memory, and hope. A plaque read, "For those who know kindness isn't weakness, and community grows by preserving history, not erasing it." The fallout was seismic. Margaret's case sparked countywide HOA reforms, and Sarah's documentary, Rooted in Truth, won awards. A letter from Margaret's son, Michael, thanked me for seeking justice without cruelty, revealing her actions stemmed from a desperate bid to win him back. Justice, I realized, wasn't just punishment, it was restoration. Margaret had tried to erase our legacy, but her actions forced me to share it, building a community stronger than she'd ever imagined.